Thus saith the Lord that formed thee, O Israel, I will bring thy seed from the east, and gather thee from the west. I will say to the north, Give them up, and to the south, Do not keep them back. Bring my sons from afar, and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Zola Levitt presents Signs of the End.
Shalom. Hello again. As part of our Signs of the End series, we've gone from prophecy, what most people think of prophecy, military events and so on, political events, to signs like refugees coming out of Russia, coming back to Israel, and so on. A major sign of the end is the isolation of Israel in the Middle East as hated of all nations, and so on, as the Lord said in Matthew 24:9. And that appears to be happening. The Middle East is a very complex place, and I'm learning about it, and I've been there all my life. But tonight our guest is very well informed and a very special person on this subject. He is Dr. Walid Phares. He's a professor of international relations at Florida Atlantic University and president of the World Lebanese Organization. And our interest in you, Dr. Phares, is you are a Middle East Christian. That is different than a Muslim, different than what we usually say in a collective term, Arabs or non-Israeli, non-Jews, whatever. Tell me, what is a Middle East Christian?
Well, that's a difficult question here in the West, because unfortunately, the Christians of the Middle East are at the same time the forgotten victims of Middle Eastern conflicts and also the forgotten nations. Let me just give you one example.
Mm-hmm.
After the massacre of Hebron, the whole world was concentrating on the Israeli-Palestinian issue.
Yeah.
2 days after, that Sunday at 8 a.m., a Christian church is bombed in Lebanon, in the city of Juni. 12 are killed and 80 are injured.
Mm-hmm.
What did you get on CNN? 20 seconds. At a time when the victims of the Hebron killing had their parents interviewed by major networks, no one was interviewed in Lebanon. Another example, in Egypt, 3 weeks after, a monastery was machine gunned by Islamic fundamentalists.
Yeah.
A dozen of Copts, Christians, were killed. You don't get anything on CNN. You barely have 2 lines in New York Times. Another third example, in the southern part of Sudan, you have every single day a village, a Christian village, which is erased, ethnic cleansed by the northern Islamic fundamentalist government. Who is talking about South Sudan? No one. So we're talking basically about millions of Middle Eastern Christians who are completely forgotten by the Western media.
And these are born-again believers. These are people who believe in Jesus Christ.
These are people who believe in Jesus Christ. These are people who are becoming martyrs, they are killed because precisely they believe in Jesus Christ. And this is why, for example, I will call them the forgotten Christian nations of the Middle East. I'm going to show you right now maps that I will publish in next fall in my book. These maps are forbidden in the Arab Middle East because they would show a truth that the world Christians, and American Christians in particular, and Jews should know about. Look here, for example. This map shows the Middle East pre-Arab conquest, meaning before the emergence of Islam in the region.
Okay, so about 7th century, the Muslims started to come. Muhammad was born in this 695. This new religion started up.
Islam starts.
So this was the map before.
This was the map that no one shows.
Mm-hmm.
This map, if you look here, before the 7th century,
Okay.
Who were the original inhabitants of the Middle East? You see here, for example, you have the Armenians, the Assyro-Chaldeans, Christians, the Phoenicians, Christians, the Hebrews in Israel, and you see they are really extended, both sides of the Jordan.
Yes.
The Coptic Egyptian Christians, the Nubians of South Sudan, the Persians, who are Zoroastrian, etc., and the Arabs. The Arabs were the inhabitant of the lower part of the Middle East.
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, and the other regions.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the inhabitants of the upper part of the Middle East were basically the Christians and the Hebrews. Now, the question is, what happened to these about 30 million Christians who were living in the Middle East at the eve of Islam.
30 million people.
Most of the historians say that there was about 30 million Christians from Armenia to Nubia in Sudan.
You were, before you leave that map, you are a Phoenician.
My ancestors were the Phoenicians. I'm a Lebanese Christian who considered himself as an Aramaic, meaning a non-Arab, a pre-Arab ethnic identity.
Interesting.
And this is not known.
It was your ancestors that took Jonah out in the boat.
Absolutely.
Sailed with Phoenician sailors.
It was the Phoenicians who sent the cedars to build the temple of Jerusalem.
Correct. Yes, King Solomon and Hiram of Tyre made a deal.
That's why today in our people, in our community, we say, from the eternal cedars of Lebanon to the eternal city of Jerusalem, we have a bridge there.
Yeah, and you are, bottom line, you're an Arab who favors a Jewish Israel.
Better than that, I'm a non-Arab Middle Eastern who's Christian, Aramaic.
You know, it isn't, you know, I look at you and I say Arab because you look like an Arab to me, but you are pre-Arab.
I am a pre-Arab. That's exactly the term.
As different as an American Indian is from what we call an American, a European immigrant.
That is correct. But we were the majority in the region. And let me just add that nowadays you have 12 million Copts in Egypt. These are non-Arabs. These are a specific ethnic group of the inhabitants of Egypt before the Arab invasion. And I'm going to show
the Christian people.
Christian, they are Christian.
And totally suppressed.
Totally suppressed. And I'm going to show you this in the map.
Please.
Now, what happened in the 7th century was the following. There was a major Arab Islamic invasion, which took place from the center of Arabia today, Saudi Arabia, into Judea, Israel, into Mesopotamia, Iraq, afterward into Persia, and then pushed into Syria and Phoenicia, and took over the land between Persia and North Africa. So we're talking about a conquest. Whose land is this? We're talking about an invasion, an Arab-Muslim invasion which took over all the upper part of the Middle East. What happened to the populations? This is a very interesting question. The Islamic armies gave 3 options for the millions and millions of Christians and Jews. The first option was to become Muslim.
Forced conversion.
Forced conversion. The second option was to keep your religion, but you have to pay an additional different tax, the jizya. And then you become a protected citizen under the rule of Islam.
As long as you're paid up.
As long as you pay the tax, and you have to wear different clothes, etc. So we're talking about the kind of apartheid which was implemented from the 7th century until the 19th century.
Like the former South Africa.
Like the former South Africa, which is still ongoing in Sudan.
Where they frankly said you can become a Muslim or you can be a second-class citizen.
That is clearly.
Make your payments on being who you are, and we'll protect you and we'll collect the tax.
And there was a third option, which was to be eliminated, simply.
That's very Arabic. I will recognize that one.
Now
they really killed a lot of people.
70% of the inhabitant became Muslims.
Oh.
So originally, the people of Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and Egypt were Christian, and they were converted, forced into Islam.
So what are now claiming to be Muslim people, the descendants of people from forced conversions? They weren't to begin with. The newspaper would have you believe the conflict over Israel, say, is between 2 ancient peoples, Palestinian Muslims and Jews. But there really weren't any such thing as Palestinian Muslims.
No, the fact is there was an invasion, and this invasion forced the local population, the majority of the local population, to become Muslim. But the question is, what happened to the others, the 30%?
Yeah.
Now, some of them remained Christians or Jews in the so-called Arab world, and they became the famous dhimmi, protected by the State of Islam, protected, quote, unquote. In fact, they were oppressed minorities, which survived century after century by paying the tax, by trying to find a modus vivendi with the regimes. But besides this, there was a fourth option, the unknown option, which was to resist and to try to create a homeland for the free Christians in the Middle East. Now, if you consult books written and published by Arabs or by Arabists in this country, you won't find this paragraph. In fact, after digging into old and ancient documents in Lebanon and in various areas in the region, we found that, first of all, in Egypt, there was an attempt to create a Coptic homeland. There was a revolution for 7 months in 748. But unfortunately for the Copts, they were completely erased by the Umayyads, by the first Arab Muslim dynasty. There was a second attempt in Mesopotamia. The Assyrian Chaldeans, who also were Christians, tried to establish a homeland, a kind of Israel, in the northern part of Iraq. They were also diminished and pushed to the north.
Sounds like the Kurds in their situation.
That's correct. And actually, the Assyrians are living among the Kurds. But the most successful homeland, which was created and withstood the Arab Islamic invasion, was in Mount Lebanon. And I'm going to show you what you cannot see in traditional history books. This is the first Christian state in Lebanon, which was established in 676 until 685. Of course, there were other successful resistance until the year 1305.
But in effect, this was a Christian state.
This was a Christian state. It was called the Marada State. Marada in Aramaic means the intifada against the Arabs at that time.
Oh,
So
my goodness.
we had the first revolution of our ancestors in 676, and they withstood the most powerful empire in the whole world. At a time when the Byzantines were, going up north and the Roman Empire was collapsing, the Christians of Lebanon created their own independent state.
Fascinating. I'm going to go to a break, but I know you have more maps, and this is intriguing. The Middle East is infinitely more complex than our own country or even Europe, I think. It's wonderful to talk to you. We'll be back with Dr. Phares after this. The land of Israel, Israel my love, is like no other land in the world. We're bound for the promised land. We're going back to Israel. And the people who have joined us on past tours say it's an experience they will treasure for the rest of their days.
I think every Christian needs to come here and just sense the same things that I guess all of them that have felt going before us, because we've heard it said that your whole life will be changed if you come to the Holy Land and you can relate more to where Jesus was in the temple and all the great and mighty things that he did.
This is my second tour with Zola. The first one was in June of 1984, and it was a beautiful tour. It was so lovely, and I love Israel so much I had to come back and see it again and live it again.
Come with us to Israel and walk where Jesus walked. Let us break bread together in Jerusalem. Our tours typically see Lebanon. We don't go into Lebanon, but we go into the northern border of Israel, a quiet place called the Good Fence, where people have passed little children back and forth for medical treatment. The Lebanese typically pass them over. Israeli doctors give them their shots and pass them back, things like this. Favors are done. And the Israelis that are there sure can tell the difference of a Lebanese Christian from what they know of as an Arab. Dr. Walid Phares, who's written 7 books on the Middle East, is aware of this too. The Lebanese Christians' attitude toward Israel is quite different from those of others in the Middle East.
Yeah, that's correct. That's also another untold story, unfortunately. And as I'm speaking tonight, you're going to watch a documentary by Discovery Channel. Mr. Robert Fisk, who wrote a certain number of articles and a book on Lebanon, which distorted the truth totally, is looking into Lebanon as a totally Islamic country, absolutely opposed to Israel.
Uh-huh.
He completely obliterated the other face, the historical face of Lebanon, which is a Christian Aramaic country. And from here we can understand what's the real position of the Lebanese Christians towards Israel. You see, when Israel was regathered again in 1948, not only the Lebanese Christians, but Christians all over the Middle East felt that the time of reversing the causality in the Middle East had come. It's very important for the Middle East Christians that a non-Arab, non-Muslim, strong entity was created again in the Middle East, because this would give the opportunity for all other oppressed and suppressed minorities, including the Christians, but also the Kurds and others, to reassess their claims. During the Lebanese War, for instance, from 1975 to 1990, when the Lebanese Christians were aggressed by the PLO, by the Islamic fundamentalists, and were totally invaded by the Syrians, the only power in the world which directly assisted the Lebanese Christians, politically, militarily, and by all means, was the State of Israel. And
I think it's well known that this army in the south of Lebanon are Christian soldiers who are friendly with Israel. They have a common enemy.
Yeah, I will go further north before talking about the south. Starting from 1976, when we had the Syrian Arab Muslim aggression against the Lebanese Christians, if we look at this map, we had this area controlled by the Arab and Syrians, and this central area, which was known as the Christian enclave, was supported by the Israelis through the port of Juni. Then at the same time in the south, we had the emergence of 3 separate islands of resistance which opened their doors to Israel.
I see.
Now with time, let's look at this other map. We had the Syrians and their allies moving into the northern part of the enclave, cutting a large zone here. But at the same time, the Israelis helping the Lebanese Christian resistance to enlarge their area. And this is what we call today the security zone. In 1990, when the Syrian army moved into the enclave, unfortunately, and eradicated the Lebanese Christian resistance over here, we had only this part, which is supported by Israel, which is still resisting the occupation of Lebanon. And this is a detailed map of what today is the security zone. Now, the Christians living here in Jazin, in Marjayun, all along the borders with Israel, are supported by Israel. And these are the only real allies of Israel in the Middle East, the only Christians who are shedding their blood to defend a Jewish state. And that should be known in the United States and in the West in general. We have a real ally in the region, which is the South Lebanon, or the Christian South Lebanon in particular.
There's so many Christian Americans who are, well, usually they're not anti-Israel. They just don't know anything about Israel. Their churches teach that it's irrelevant. Dallas Seminary has changed its position, and students from there they say God's covenants will be fulfilled some great day, but this isn't it. Israel's outside of God's will, spiritually disobedient, and so on. I've heard it, it's just a sea change from where it was before. And are they aware that Christians, like you say, are shedding their blood for the sake of Israel?
Let me first say that in order for God's will to be fulfilled, there should be Christians. And in order for Christians to exist, they should survive. And I'm talking about those Christians in the Middle East who are among the first Christians in the world. And in the name of these Middle Eastern Christians, and particularly in the name of the Lebanese Christians, I would like to address the American Christian public by saying that the only state in the world, the only country in the world, which is helping the Lebanese Christians and the Middle Eastern Christians to survive is the state of Israel. So from this perspective, of course, we think that the survival, the strength of a Jewish state in the region is absolutely important for the Lebanese Christians.
You would be swamped. You would be swamped by this Islamic armies if it weren't for the resistance of Israel, wouldn't you?
Not only we will be terminated, but then the fundamentalist Islamic movement would reach the European continent, the Central Asian continent, would go through Africa. The whole fate of the 21st century is here, between Israel and South Lebanon. If they would collapse, then we'll have a complete collapse in Africa, in Asia, and in the southern part of Europe.
How do the Middle East Christians look at this peace process then that's going on now?
Well, definitely, any peace process is positive if it will lead to a real peace. And coming from a Middle Eastern Christian background and with a 1,300 years of experience with Islamic fundamentalism, we could say that the current peace process lacks of an aspect which is comprehensiveness. It has been narrowed to very technical things. We are talking about a real peace, meaning when will the Arabs and Islamic countries would recognize the existence of a non-Arab, non-Islamic entity? Should it be Israel, or the Lebanon Christian, or the Copts of Egypt, or the Assyrians of Iraq? I don't think that at this stage we have a sufficient change in the political culture in this region to talk about real peace. And I'm very afraid that making drastic moves, giving a lot of land without a dramatic change in political culture would one day cost Israel more than a war, maybe a total destruction.
With all your knowledge of the Middle East and its history and so on, what's your hunch about what's going on? What's going to happen?
If you read the Arabic press, and please read it in Arabic, do not read it in a translated English by spokesman here in the United States. On the one hand, you have the emergence of Islamic fundamentalism. The fundamentalists got 51% in the latest elections in Algeria.
Yeah.
They might at any time take over the government. Islamic fundamentalists, and ask the CIA report, are on the edge of taking over power in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
The Islamic fundamentalists became 23% of the Jordanian parliament. They are very strong in Syria.
Mm-hmm.
They have the third of the parliament in Lebanon, and they control the third of the country in Lebanon. So when you look at this picture, and you understand that Sudan is undertaking an ethnic cleansing against the Christians in the south, you understand that the immediate future of the Arab-Muslim region is going towards Islamic radicalism. Is it the time for Israel to look into concessions, or is it the time for Israel to look into real allies in the region? It's the time for Israel to look into the Christian minorities. It's the time for Israel to look into those Arab moderates who believe in the peace process. Why don't the Israelis talk with the Arab opposition democratic movement? Why do they think that by establishing a peace process with dictatorship, they are ensuring the peace in the region? I think any peace which is made and signed with people who do not respect democracy, who destroys their own people, such as in Hama or in Iraq, when the Kurds were bombed and gassed by Saddam Hussein, are not be able to keep their word.
When the Israelis try to negotiate, they seem to die. I heard one of them say, I like war better than the peace process. There are fewer casualties. The world press is no help. In your view, why do they always, well, they seem to bash Israel. They seem to treat Islamic fundamentalists like just another political party and not what looks to me like a gang of terrorists. Why is the media biased this way?
The media, unfortunately, is suffering from two problems. One, the media is looking into Israel in a different way because Israel is a democracy and the media can reach Israel through the democratic system. Why don't the journalist or the correspondent in the Western world do not go and report about Sudan? Why don't they go to South Sudan?
Well, you never hear a news story from any Islamic-controlled country.
Unfortunately. Secondly, there is another phenomenon. Saudi Arabia is financing a lot of PR groups in this country.
Wow.
You know, the money, the Arab money is so strong all over the world. And it's not strange at all that stories such as the story we just mentioned in the first section about Lebanon and Israel and Egypt would emphasize the Islamic identity of these regions.
Uh-huh.
What about the pre-Islamic identity? What about the minorities? What about the ethnic groups? We are now in the age of ethnic explosion, where we should go back to the origins of each group.
How many Middle East Christians, Arabs, and Lebanese are there in the U.S.?
It's amazing. This is the third untold story.
Uh-huh.
We have the tendency in this country to think that all those coming from Arab-speaking countries
Uh-huh.
into the United States are Arabs. This is also a wrong vision.
Yeah.
In fact, 80% of those coming from Arab-speaking countries are Christians.
80%.
80%. And out of these 80%, 75% are Lebanese Christians, particularly Maronites, meaning Aramaic Christians.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about a misperception. Those who actually emigrated from the Arab-controlled world are those who were oppressed, meaning the Christians. Unfortunately, what happened is that the Arab lobbies in this country, financed, trained, and organized by the Arab countries, have chosen Christians among these Arab-speaking people and appointed them as leaders or so-called leaders of the Arab lobbies. This is why the American public and the Christian public in this country in particular have a misperception about who represent whom in this community.
Fascinating. I thought myself from Arabs are people who blow up the World Trade Center and are all Muslims and all militant and so on. And when you pointed out, I know some Arab Christians. And they're normal, everyday, believing Christian people.
That's correct.
And they're typically supportive of Israel.
That's correct. Let me just point out here that you have non-Arab Christians such as the Lebanese, the Assyrian, and the Copts, and these are the majority. Then you have a minority of Arab Christians, such as the Palestinian and Jordanian. They are ethnically Arabs, but they are Christians.
Yes.
And among these two groups, you have a majority which thinks that the major threat to the survival of Christians in the Middle East is Islamic fundamentalism or Islamic extremism. Of course, all of us have wonderful friends among the Muslim community as individuals, but the problem is that those who are in control in the Middle East are Islamic fundamentalists.
Dr. Walid Phares, he's very well informed in the Middle East. He's written 7 books about it. He's a professor of international relations, Florida Atlantic University, and he's president of the World Lebanese Organization. If you'd like to get in touch, you know, when we had Dr. Anish Sharosh on the program, we had Louis Amato. Typically, we have spokesmen who are Arabs. People get excited about that. We can get in touch with him for you, and we'll have his address. So just write to us, and we'll pass it along. And thank you, Dr. Phares. I appreciate your sharing with us, your maps and your knowledge. You can you can see Lebanon. Tours are going up there in Christian Lebanon, believe it or not. We can probably arrange that through this ministry. And write me about it if you'd like to see. It could be part of our tour or whatever. I have seen into Lebanon and feasted my eyes because it is a beautiful country from the northern borders of Israel. It is beautiful enough that when I read from Deuteronomy 3:25, it says, I pray thee, let me go over and see the good land that is beyond Jordan, that goodly mountain and Lebanon. That's how they felt about it way back then. Our offer tonight has to do with Israel's right to the land. We have a pamphlet by that name, which we've distributed for years by Dr. Hawking. I wrote the introduction. It's a very good biblical study of just why this is Jewish land according to Scripture. Our Pilgrim's Map goes with it. It's kind of a tour in an armchair. It's kind of fun to use. And our bumper sticker that says, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, the thing that I say at the end of every one of our programs. So we call this the Israel package. Just ask for that, or Israel's Right package. And it's $10. We'll pay the shipping. I just want you to have these things. We'll do the shipping and handling. If you'll send us a $10 bill, we'll give you the booklet and the map of Israel, which shows southern Lebanon as well. And the Pray for the Peace of Jerusalem bumper sticker. Put that on your car. Well, if enough people pray for it, maybe it'll happen. We can reach Dr. Phares for you, as I said, and folks, remember the funds. That's how we really make these programs. Even if it's an offer you already have or something you don't necessarily need to have, send us a gift, and it helps us bring people like this to this program. I know you enjoyed it. I did too. And beyond that, always, Shalom, Shalom, Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.